One of the difficult things for me about making this content is that I am trying to stay as concise as possible and not rambling too much. When it comes to football games in general, and Madden in particular, I just have a lot to say, which means editing my thoughts down is a very tough thing to do, and I'm liable to miss some things. Case in point, while gathering footage for the next video in my How Madden Fails to Simulate Football series, I noticed a few things that, in retrospect, I wish I had included in the first episode about quarter length. So, I decided to create this brief addendum video to address those few extra points. 9.5 minutes into that first video, I said the following. Football game. So, at the risk of sounding like I'm gatekeeping, if a football game can't hold your attention for 90 minutes, then I am strongly skeptical that you actually like the sport of football. I mean, you do watch real-life football games, right? Well, I mean, you can almost play 2 full-length Madden games in the time it would take to watch a single NFL broadcast, let alone to park your ass in the bleachers and watch a game live and in person. And then probably be able to play a whole other game of Madden in the time it would take you to commute back home. I then pointed out that a 15-minute quarter game with the accelerated clock can be reliably finished in 90 minutes or less. What I neglected to mention is that you don't even have to spend the whole 90 minutes, because Madden has, for years now, included a feature called SuperSim. If you are pressed for time, you can use the Play the Moments feature to only play key third down conversions, red zone visits, 2-minute drills, and other such key moments. You can also SuperSim any franchise game at any point to skip however much of the game you don't want to play. Using these features, you can complete a 15-minute quarter-length match in 30 minutes or less. In fact, this seems to be how Tiburon and EA want you to play Madden's franchise mode, by, skipping a majority of the actual football games. And this is because the Play the Moments mode is the first option that is selected when you attempt to play a franchise game. It's also the biggest, flashiest button on the UI, while the option to play the full-length game in its entirety might as well just be buried off to the side. I'm pretty sure that in UI Design 101, one of the first lessons that you'll probably learn is that it's good practice that you make the most commonly used option be the one that is selected by default. Now, what do you think this says about Tiburon and EA's priorities when it comes to simulation and franchise play in Madden? At this point, I've lost count over the years of how many times I've had to back out of the controller select screen because I accidentally pressed the Play the Moments option on account of having forgotten that the Play the Full Game option is, for whatever reason, not the default option in franchise mode. Later in that first episode, I also talked about the general pacing of Madden's on-field action. I probably could have talked more about how gameplay moves too fast and feels like it runs in fast forward, and how I miss the old, very slow game speed option that was removed from Madden last year due to problems with certain animations. I really hope that comes back this year or next year. Or I could talk about how I've come to prefer the slower speed of play of 2K's NFL 2K5 and All-Pro 2K8 games. I could also have talked more about how rubber banding mechanics lead to excessive big plays on longer quarter lengths, and how the game's logic often tries too hard to try to make every game have an exciting finish. It is immensely frustrating to be absolutely in control of a game for 45 minutes of play, only to have the CPU switch into turbo mode to mount an epic fourth quarter comeback. Suddenly, your running backs are getting stuffed on every run, your receivers are dropping catchable balls, your QB is constantly under pressure, your own blitzes can never seem to get home anymore, and the CPU QB goes into turbo mode. It's fine to see this sort of thing happen every once in a while. Upsets and blown fourth quarter leads do happen a few times in an NFL season. It's part of football.
Everybody played 3 quarters. The Bears are who we thought they were. And that's why we took the damn field. Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass. But they are who we thought they were. And we let them off the hook.
Thanks, Coach. But Madden seems to think that these things happen on an almost weekly basis, and it just doesn't. It's also one thing for the CPU to go into turbo mode for 1 or 2 drives in a 6-minute fourth quarter, down by 1 or 2 scores in order to make the game competitive. It's an entirely different thing to see this turbo mode be sustained over 15 or 20 minutes of regulation play and see it erase a 3-score lead or more. I hate to break this to you, EA and Tiburon, but blowouts and uncontested one-sided football games happen all the time. Believe me, I'm a Bears fan, a mega Bears fan, in fact. And also, as an alum of UNLV, I watch as many of UNLV's football games as I can. So, yeah, I've seen quite a few fourth quarter collapses and upsets. But I've also seen a lot of blowouts. But the thing that I want to talk more specifically about is how passing routes feel like they go deeper down the field than they actually should. In that first video, I showed examples of how much shallower the passing routes are in Maximum Football 2019 as a contrast to Madden, but after playing some more Madden to gather footage for the next video, I realized that using Maximum Football as a counterpoint was completely unnecessary. I could have just used Madden's own play art and skill trainer. Go ahead, look at the play art in any passing play of Madden. Zoom the coach cam out and look at the routes that the receivers are supposedly going to run. Look at how shallow they look in the play art. Then, snap the ball and run the play, and look at how much deeper the receivers actually run the routes in practice. Is the play art more representative of how deep these routes are supposed to be run? The skill trainer definitely seems to think so. Take a look at this drill regarding how to beat a cover 3 defense. It tasks you with throwing an in route into the labeled zone underneath the deep middle safety and between the 2 linebackers in the hook zone. At least I'm assuming the game is talking about these 2 linebackers, because what other hook zone defenders could the tutorial be talking about? But if you try to actually run this drill in the game, you may find that it is surprisingly difficult to complete this particular pass in the specified zone. The reason for this is because the receiver doesn't run the route that's drawn in the play art. He runs his route several yards deeper into the dead zone between the zones. He runs over the top of the hook zones. Now, he is open, to the game's credit, he's open, he's not covered, but you have to throw the ball very low and lead the receiver down back towards the line of scrimmage in order to have any hope of him catching the ball in the marked zone that he's supposed to catch it in. In fact, you're probably much better off just throwing high and behind that receiver in order to make him catch the pass in the seams between the 2 safeties. But let me remind you that the instructions for the tutorial don't say that this route is intended to target the seam between the 2 safeties. The instructions explicitly say that this route is intended to target the space between the 2 hook zone defenders. This space right here. But the receiver runs too deep to reliably complete this drill using the instructions that the game gives you. The play art and the tutorial itself seem to think that this route should be run several yards shallower than it actually is. And the reason I suspect that these routes always seem to go deeper than they're actually supposed to go in Madden is because the game is designed to help you get larger chunk plays so that you can move the ball downfield and actually, have some offense and score some points in that short 20 to 30 minute regulation. To further cement this point, I booted up NFL 2K5 to see how deep those routes run, and no surprise, they run much shallower. Outs, ins, and drags in particular are run 2 or 3 yards upfield in 2K5, as opposed to going 5 to 10 yards in Madden. And since the defenses are much less spread out, they're able to actually cover those routes and converge on them when caught in order to minimize yards after the catch. I found that even without an accelerated clock, NFL 2K5's slower pace of play makes longer quarters of 10 to 12 minutes much more viable than similarly length quarters in other games that lack an accelerated clock. And yeah, look, I'm sick to death of comparing modern Madden games to a 2K football game from 15 years and 2, almost 3 now, console generations ago. But if you want us simulation football fans to stop bringing it up, all you have to do is make a simulation football game that does a comparable job of respecting the fundamentals of football. Do that, and you'll never have to hear about 2K5 again. Oh, and it would also spare me from having to figure out how to import updated rosters onto my PS3.